I had to sort of chuck one in and put my hand over it.
They're escaping.
I've had that happen with apples before, yeah.
I have the Breville juice fountain, and sometimes that's spinning so fast that you drop something in, it spits it back out unless it's really big. So I was wearing a lot of lime that day.
Yeah. We've got the wide mouth juicer, the one that's so popular, I can't remember. Yeah, my wife's family is from the Buffalo, New York area, and they get some very nice, very complex apples at this time of year. Not just your, normal garden variety galas or pink ladies or anything like that, or Granny Smiths. They get some nice Cortlands and Macintosh and a little more of the tart, bitter apples, which lend themselves well to cider. And there's been a number of times when I've discovered that they've supplied us with, 20 pounds of apples from here and there to play with. So one of the things that we like to do is, take some of those apples and put them through the juicer, and it seems like I'm going to kill that juicer each time when we put 20 pounds of apples through it at once. But it's able to handle it, and we get a wonderful, fresh, complex juice that we can play with for doing some ciders. It's always fun to do in the fall. And we try to put things other than cinnamon in our ciders. We like to put cardamom and star anise and some more interesting flavor in it than just going straight cinnamon.
It
all doesn't have to. Right.
I go for like a whole collection of spices in my cisers. I really like spicy cisers. So I even put cracked black pepper in mine.
Oh yeah, or what is that pepper substitute?
Yes, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Grains of Paradise.
Grains of Paradise.
Yeah.
That's it.
Because I was talking with Rob Ratliff the other day about that, and Grains of Paradise and Gallon Gale is another one I really like in spiced ciders.
I haven't played with.
I have some of that. It's a lot hotter than ginger, or at least the stuff I have is.
Well, it's kind of a ginger pepper.
Yeah,
it does both, So, but I like it. I learned about it in my historical stuff, doing the living history, mead, beer, wine, and cordial making stuff. And
I got mine from one of my SCA buddies.
Yeah, that's where I found it too, originally. But there's a recipe for spiced wine, for a spiced, they call it a digestive, but it's actually basically a hot spiced wine that can be served hot or cold, and it was very popular in the court of Henry VIII. And I actually make this, and he does it up sweet, because, Henry VIII, he liked to eat. And so, after however many turkey legs, my history buff friends out there going, seriously, did you just go there?
Yes, you did.
I really did, yes, just because I wanted to, just chuff on them. But anyway, so what they would do is they take the wine and they would heat the wine, but not to the point where it would boil off the alcohol, and add the spices. Let it cool down, pour it off, spices and all, into a container, seal it up, and let it sit overnight. And then after that, they use a dry wine, so I start with like a Burgundy, and then the next day would strain off the spices and sweeten to whatever level you want to sweeten it to.
Exactly. Yeah. That's just mulling it at first. To really warm up the spices and get, the oils flowing out of it, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And then continue to sit to really pull all the stuff. But that particular recipe had ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, Gallon Gale, and there was something else in there. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. But the Gallon Gale was how I found it, was making that, and that rapidly went from being just some kind of curiosity to all my friends would be like, "Are you bringing that stuff?" It was hilarious.
I'll have to go ahead and track that down and see if I can
just ping me after the show, and because I want to put the recipe up on the show page too, and just remind me, and I'll send it to you because I have it. I make it regularly when I go to events because people like it, and it's easy to do. You don't need to actually brew or ferment anything. It's just a matter of heating wine and adding spices and then sweetening. I haven't tried sweetening it with honey. I usually just when I originally started making it, was just using white sugar because that's what the recipe called for. But I've often thought it might be interesting to try it with some varietals to see.
Sure, just to see what that brings to it.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, it's a great way to make a bottle of cheap-ass Burgundy taste okay. Because I was buying like the big gallon jugs of that stuff that's like $12.
God, I wish we could get stuff like that here.
All right. We got David Webb is Skyping me on the side here, and he's saying that white pepper is another one that he suggests.
Yeah, white pepper is an excellent ingredient.
I like white pepper, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is good stuff.
And, just adding all these different ingredients. And don't be afraid to experiment a little bit.
I mess with stuff.
There's something to be said about, making your traditional meads to the best of your ability, but don't be afraid to experiment outside the box either. So there's mutual admiration that you can get from both philosophies, essentially. So.
Well, somebody was saying, and I can't remember who, but it was on some discussion of mead or another. Started, I think, originally by John Talkington on Facebook, and it was a discussion of various and sundry things. But somebody popped up in the middle of it and said, "It's equal parts art and science."
Mm-hmm. True, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the best descriptors that you can bring to this craft. It is a craft.
Yeah.
And as much as you can follow the steps that you've outlined step by step, just like following a recipe, there are some aspects to it that are a real art, and spices are one of those aspects. And to some extent as well, because a lot of times the fruits that you get can be different year to year, just like honey variety that you get can be different from year to year. For example, you can get some really, really wonderful tasting orange blossom honey in a good year, and then in a bad year, the bees are off collecting other things, and you get a different ratio of orange blossom to whatever wildflower that they're going out after that's in the same area. And so there really is an art to try to bring a consistency to what you're producing, and that I think is the art, or the best part of being a mead maker is can you make something and make it well and make it consistently. Consistency is key. If you can do that, then you really have nailed down your process at that point. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, we've talked about the more common citrus things like oranges and lemons and limes. Now, you guys have got a whole bunch of different citrus stuff down there. I'm curious to see what else have you messed with, personally or professionally. I just am really curious to see what other stuff have you messed with and how did it come out.
Sure, we've made kumquat meads, we've made loquat meads, we played with Buddha's hand, which is basically all lemon peel.
Okay. Buddha's hand?
I've seen those, they're weird.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very strange looking. It actually looks like a hand with extremely long fingers and long fingernails.
Weird.
But it grows in the finger-like pattern, but it's a citrus that is basically just all zest. So you can imagine just a citrus that looks like a hand with multiple fingers on it that grow out 6 to 8 inches from the center, but it has no fruit whatsoever on the inside. So we've messed with that, but largely, once again, just for the zest, to see what we could do with the zest. And typically it's just, like you said, mention a coloring and a flavoring ingredient at that point. And pomelo is another one that I mentioned before, which is a cross between a grapefruit and a Meyer lemon. Of course, Meyer lemons themselves are real popular down here. We've made a number of different Meyer lemon-based meads, like a lemon chiffon mead, which is nice. We use the Meyer lemon for that, and some of the ingredients that you would typically find in a lemon chiffon pie. And of course, my mouth is watering.
I know, right?
But yeah, some of the more.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, with all of this, playing with citrus, have you ever do you use pectic enzyme, or have you ever had problems with pectin from overuse of citrus?
Typically not. Usually, we're able to. Pectin haze isn't a major concern unless we're working with something that is extremely full. Yeah, we find it more often, like in pineapple and ingredients like that, have an extreme amount of pectin in them, but not so much in the citrus juice. We really haven't treated with pectinase or anything like that to take out any of the pectin enzyme that's in it. Just have not noticed that much of a haze problem, and most of ours were able to get fairly clear, if not absolutely crystal clear. Most of our haze problems are related to yeast still being in suspension. So typically we'll filter just through a plate and frame filter, starting at 14 micron, racking all the way down to 0.45 micron. And don't really notice that much of a chill haze with citrus, so we haven't had a need for it. It's only when you start getting into some of the, some fruits like guava or pineapple, or when you get into apples themselves, which are not typically a Florida crop, that we would bring a little pectinase in to try to neutralize the pectic enzyme, clear it out.
Okay, I was curious.
Typically, we don't see too much of it. Yeah.
I was curious because most of the experiences I've got with citrus are in Joe's Ancient Orange using bread yeast, and the only one of those that I ever had that refused to clear until I added pectinase was one where I just went nuts with the citrus, and I put like a lime and half a grapefruit and a couple of lemons and 2 or 3 oranges in one gallon, and that was that was the only one that I ever actually needed to use a pectinase with, and that was what cleared it finally.
That's interesting because typically, with an ancient orange mead, if you're using bread yeast or anything like that, you really just have to let it sit for it to clear.
Yeah, well, so typically you're also only using just the one orange. Yeah, I mean, I messed with the recipe. Yeah. I totally broke the warranty. I do it all the time. But it was. I'm thinking it's because I used more than one I used more than one citrus fruit. Usually I find it's okay, like I've done with grapefruit, I've done it with lemon, I've done it with tangelos, I've done it with blood oranges, I've done it with like navels, and I think I probably tried it with clementines a couple of times. And never had a problem as long as I only used like the equivalent of one orange was worth of fruit. But the time I did with the, I put a lot more citrus in there than one normally would put into a Joe's Ancient in 1 gallon, and that was the only time I've ever had it not clear due to it must have been pectic haze, because adding the pectinase is what cleared it up.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Typically, if we have something that has difficulty clearing, filtration is our normal step. But if it's something along those lines, use what works. I'm not above seeing mead makers use bentonite or pectinase to take out chill haze or pectin haze, but I've seen a lot of mead makers use Eurofinings as well, or biofine, to try to clear out any residual yeast that's on the inside of the finished mead as well. But typically we don't see that a whole lot. I'm kind of surprised that. I kind of wish I'd been there to take a look at it.
It ended up being a little bit too. Yeah, it ended up being a little too strong in taste for my taste, so it's not an experiment I'd probably want to do again. I get a recipe and I got to mess with it, and that's just the way I am. But in my particular case, the way I've messed with the permanent messing with that I've done with Joe's Ancient is I only use the zest and the juice, because I have found that using the pith gives me heartburn.
It does. It adds a little bit of a